From its very inception, metal has looked to push the boundaries of what was once thought possible in the realm of making music. Bands pushing the lyrical themes, speed, technicality, vocal style, or fusing other sounds led to an explosion of different subgenres of metal. So both on a mainstream level and an underground level, metal has always focused on pushing what was once thought possible. This approach to making music would carry over into the new millennium, with a new wave of bands blending several other subgenres of metal in a unique way, with some bands focusing on the heavier side, with the emergence of metalcore and deathcore, and other bands focusing on blending the raw intensity of metal with catchy songwriting and more progressive sensibilities, which would eventually be referred to as gent. While it is highly debated whether or not gent is a real subgenre or just a style of playing guitar, the gent sound would take over in a big way in the 2010s, with many of those bands overlapping with the growing metalcore and deathcore movements at the time. One of the bands at the forefront of this movement and highly regarded in the metal community is After the Burial. After dropping their first album in 2006 independently with a surprising amount of skill and quality, the band would get picked up by Sumerian Records and go on to drop consistently throughout the 2000s and 2010s, quickly gaining a reputation as one of the best bands in the genre, as well as one of the best live bands in general. After the Burial were at the forefront of the modern era of progressive metal, while being one of the first bands to embrace the gent sound. They were a big part of exposing the genre to people who haven't heard the sound and maybe haven't listened to bands like Meshuggah yet. Regardless, the band will go from strength to strength, headlining tours, being celebrated for their quality live shows, their unique blend of different subgenres, and their guitarists being highly regarded as some of the best in the genre. However, a series of events would take place that would shake After the Burial and the wider metal community to its core. Tragically, one of their guitarists, Justin Lowe, would suffer a public mental breakdown in 2015 that some would describe as a paranoid episode. He would leave the band with a lengthy Facebook post that has been described as barely coherent by some. He would go missing a month later, and eventually he was found dead below a bridge at the age of just 32 years old. The series of events surrounding the death of Justin Lowe has been shrouded in mystery, and there's not a lot of information that has been shared with the public. This story is one that is deeply personal to me, as I saw this unfold in real time. And I really didn't know how mental health worked at this time, so it honestly left me pretty confused. I didn't understand how someone so successful in their career that I personally looked up to could all of a sudden be so unwell, seemingly so quickly. It's a tragic story that I'm looking to shed light on because in spite of how he passed, Justin Lowe should be remembered for his deep love for the music and his top-level skills as a guitarist. So with all that being said, this is the life and mysterious death of Justin Lowe. Justin Lowe was born on December 17, 1982, in Flemington, New Jersey, to parents Colin and Marie Lowe. He had one sister named Shannon. His family would end up relocating to Venatus Heights, Minnesota, and that's where he would eventually form After the Burial. There's not a lot of information out there on his early life, but according to his family, his love for music started at an early age. As early as 12 months old, Lowe would be seen fiddling around with his father's stereo equipment, and by 2 years old, he was playing drums with pots and pans as many of us do as kids. He was exposed to the contemporary rock and metal of the day at an early age, with some of his favorite bands at the time being well-known gateway bands for many metalheads like Metallica, Pantera, and early Machine Head. It was at the age of 9 years old when he first picked up a guitar, and he, quote, never put it down. But around this time, he actually started to splinter off from the usual bands and get more into progressive metal. He was in the 4th grade when a friend of his gave him a cassette of Dream Theater's album, Images and Words, that would influence him in a deep way. Listening to this album around the time he first picked up a guitar made him want to become a better player. Images and Words was actually the first tab book he bought. It was discovering Dream Theater that would lead him to discovering other progressive metal bands, including Meshuggah. In his own words, Justin Lowe would say, quote,
I grew up though listening to a lot of progressive stuff at a really young age too. Like I got the first, like, I guess you can call them progressive. I mean, almost everybody does, but Dream Theater, the first,
right.
I was in 4th grade and somebody gave me the Images and Words cassette, and that was the first time I'd ever heard like really insane stuff. Like, and I was like, you know, an aspiring drummer, and then I heard Portnoy, and I'm like, oh wow, because up until that point, you know, nothing against like, you know, Lars or anything, but Metallica, you know, that was like my biggest influence, especially on the drums, and like, you know, being really young, and like I didn't really get into the super progressive kind of stuff. Like I grew up listening to Pantera, Metallica, and then later on Machine Head, and that's the stuff Meshuggah as well. And, you know, and Dream Theater is always the band that kind of made me strive to want to be a little bit better at my instrument. And that was actually like the first guitar tab book I actually purchased was Images and Words. And I wasn't anywhere near like anything that I felt like I would be able to be like play comfortably. Right. But I knew that it would set the bar so high that even if I got just close to learning that one song, maybe I'd be a little bit better, you know, in a different regard. So.
Right.
But he wasn't only a guitarist, as Lowe would learn drums too, and was actually more of an aspiring drummer at first, playing percussion in his school's music program from the 6th grade all the way up to his senior year in high school. Lowe also dabbled in other creative outlets, as he was a producer and had a deep passion for photography. He graduated from White Bear Lake High School in 2001, and just a few years later, he would help form After the Burial, where his love for progressive metal would eventually turn into his full-time job and career. After the Burial was formed in 2004 when Justin Lowe was about 20 years old. It was formed by Lowe as one of the guitarists, vocalist Nick Wellner, guitarist Trent Hofdahl, and drummer Greg Erickson. They had a fill-in bassist at the time until Lee Forrell joined the band via a Twin Cities hardcore message board. It was relatively quickly that they had a full lineup and started working on music. Seeing as this was the early 2000s, there's not a lot of flyers or live shows from After the Burial's early days out there, which is honestly pretty tragic. But the band would quickly develop their sound, which had a unique blend of different styles of metal. Guitarist Trent Hofdahl and Justin Lowe were key in developing this sound. It would be displayed in their songwriting, melodies, solos, and tight rhythmic riffs that would very quickly distinguish themselves from the other bands in their scene. They all had a lot of chemistry together as musicians, and eventually, After the Burial recorded a 3-song demo at the tail end of 2004, which you could easily find on YouTube. The 3 songs featured would end up being on their first full-length about 2 years later, and it's crazy how early in their career they had a distinct sound with an uncanny songwriting ability for the time. I mean, for the mid-2000s, this is crazy. Like, check this out. The next year in 2005, they would record a second demo, with the songs featured on the first one being re-recorded, and an additional song was on this demo entitled Warm Thoughts of a Warfare. This song would go on to be included in their full-length album the next year also. After the Burial would quickly gain a reputation as one of the best bands in their local scene, with a lot of moshing at their shows and great stage presence, all while still playing with tight precision. In the mid-2000s, there were other bands coming up playing a similar style to them in the Midwest, like Nostalgia, Born of Osiris, and Valamaya. The latter two would also go on to be signed to Sumerian Records. But with their growing reputation in the local scene and their shows getting a lot bigger, After the Burial would record their first full-length album. Forging a Future Self was released on March 1st, 2006, with the material actually being recorded back in 2005. So this album was self-released. However, they did have help with distribution by Corrosive Records, but they never officially inked a deal with them. Forging a Future Self showed exactly why After the Burial were one of the best bands in their scene, and the album was a perfect display of what made them so unique for the time. They were one of the first gent bands as we know the genre today, if I'm being completely honest, because other gent bands like Periphery, Fell Silent, Tesseract, Sixth, and Chimp Spanner were all playing a similar style that was heavily influenced by the unique polyrhythmic riffs of Meshuggah, but those bands that I mentioned were either still instrumental bedroom projects, had unstable lineups, or were playing a version of gent that would be more described as avant-garde metal as opposed to modern gent. So After the Burial were one of the earliest bands playing modern gent, and this album helped cement them as a band that had huge potential outside of their local Midwest scene. Forging a Future Self seamlessly blended styles of deathcore, metalcore, progressive metal, gent, and melodic death metal. Some songs showcased a more melodic death metal style, reminiscent of bands like The Black Dahlia Murder and As Blood Runs Black, mixed with the crushing breakdowns of the bursting and deathcore scene of the 2000s, and this was a style that they would continue to hone. Some of the main riffs were just straight up these insanely catchy melodic riffs that aren't typical in metal, with songs like A Steady Decline and The Forfeit. Their vocalist Nick had a great range as well, keeping up with the musicians of the band with no problem, having a range of highs, lows, and mids that were performed extremely well. His vocal style for some reason reminds me of Infinite Death era Thou Art Is Murder, if you know, you know. But aside from the tight songwriting and performances on this album, the thing that set After the Burial apart was that they weren't afraid to show off their skills, but they didn't fall for the trap of being technical just for technicality's sake. They had catchy songs with crazy breakdowns and two-step parts that would easily open a pit, while also not being able to shred like the thrash bands did in the 80s or bands like Dream Theater or Pantera were known to do. Even if that style was considered old and played out at this time, they weren't afraid to play how they wanted to, and it showed. They even had these great clean guitar passages, and the intro song Pie has this beautiful acoustic part that I've always loved. Songs like A Steady Decline and Fingers Like Daggers would also become fan favorites. After the Burial helped pioneer the wave of bands that would become more prominent in metal in the 2010s that some would refer to as djent, but these bands often blended the rhythmic groove of djent with metalcore or deathcore. I say this because after the Burial were playing this style like 5 years before it became commonplace, which is very impressive. They were also playing with 7-string guitars, which I feel like wasn't as common back then either, but I could be wrong. Overall, Forsaken Future Self is a fantastic album and one of my favorites from their discography. Although the impact of this album wasn't immediately seen, it influenced a lot of bands and guitarists, and this album would help them land a deal with Sumerian Records just 2 years later. But before this, the band will go through some lineup changes. With the release of Forsaken Future Self in 2006, After the Burial would continue the grind of being in a local band, playing whatever shows they could, continuing to build their reputation and get their music out there. But it was during this time in the mid-2000s that this type of grassroots way of building a fan base was essential, but the emergence of sites like MySpace, Facebook, and YouTube would change this and help After the Burial to engage with their current fan base and gain new ones. This is how bands like Job for a Cowboy and Suicide Silence got on in a big way. After the Burial toured with bands like Hatebreed, The Acacia Strain, and God Forbid in 2007, really helping to get their name out there. This is when the band really started to make a name for themselves and become known outside of their immediate local scene, and also when they started to get a taste of the touring lifestyle. This is where Justin Lowe began to see the country and experience the good times of touring, late nights drinking with your friends, and really getting to bond with the rest of his bandmates. But it was when the band started to tour and get their music out there to more people that their vocalist, Nick Wellner, would come to the decision that the touring lifestyle wasn't for him, so he would leave the band. I understand this, as a touring lifestyle could be very taxing as you're away from your family for long periods of time, and other aspects of touring just really aren't for everybody, like those long drives. There's actually footage of Nick's last show with After the Burial out there on YouTube, and the turnout for this show was absolutely insane, which goes to show the love their local scene had for the band during this time, and also showed their great stage presence as well. This specific live video and other videos like it would actually inspire me to start my own band in high school, as the energy during this set is just indescribable. The band stayed on good terms with Nick, and he even does guest vocals with the band whenever they play Minnesota. But soon after this, their new drummer Eric Robles would leave also, so After the Burial were going through some lineup changes, and they added Nostalgia vocalist Grant Luma, and eventually, after their second record was released, drummer Dan Carl would be added to the lineup as well. In spite of some of the lineup changes, their luck would begin to change, and their relentless work rate would pay off, as in 2008, After the Burial would get signed to Sumerian Records. Sumerian Records was a small label at the time that only started 2 years prior, but had buzzing bands on it like The Faceless and Veil of Maya. This was the moment that Justin Lowe and the rest of the band's dream was realized. For those of us in bands, a lot of the time, it's our goal to become a working musician. Justin Lowe fulfilled this dream, and now it wasn't just a passion or a hobby. Being a guitarist in a band was now his career. I could only imagine how this feels, but it was soon after signing with Sumerian Records that After the Burial would start to work on their second album. For their first major label release, however, the recording process wasn't as smooth. Apparently, their vocalist Grant was hard to work with, and due to his lack of output, their guitarist Trent Hovdahl would handle writing the lyrics and arranging the vocal parts, which is impressive as he's really not a vocalist aside from some backing parts. The drums would be programmed by Justin Lowe since they had yet to find a drummer at this time. But on July 22nd, 2008, After the Burial would drop their second album, Rareform, which is an undeniable classic. However, a lot of the fans, including myself, prefer the re-release version of Rareform that would drop the next year. This original version of Rareform was still received well from fans, and it helped to put their name out there as a part of this new crop of bands making their own djent and progressive infused version of metalcore. Even if I'm not a fan of Grant's vocals, some fans think he was their best vocalist, and a lot of people rock with his vocal style, so I thought it was worth putting that out there. The songs were always there on Rareform, even if the production was a little rough on this version. Sometimes the production could really make or break an album, as seen with albums like Breeding the Spawn by Suffocation and The Fantasy Effect by Reflections. I actually think the rough production of The Fantasy Effect has its charm to it, but I don't mind it personally. But a lot of people hate the production on that album, so it applies. But I digress. Anyways, even with After the Burial starting to tour, dropping their first album with a major label, and getting their name out there to more people, there was still issues with their vocalist Grant at the time. So according to AllMusic, Grant would leave the band due to clashes with other members of the band. Although I can't confirm this, according to Metal Archives, he was actually kicked out of the band due to provoking physical fights with members of After the Burial and allegedly essaying women on tour, which really hasn't been confirmed, but people on Reddit seem to corroborate this, as some has described him as a quote overall POS. However, this information I can't 100% confirm. So regardless of how it went down, Grant wasn't the best fit for After the Burial personality-wise, and he was no longer in the band. He was only with After the Burial for about a year, and in 2008, they will complete their lineup, adding vocalist Anthony Nordamazo and drummer Dan Carl, who also played with Nostalgia too. They will still tour together for a large amount of the year with this new lineup, as they were a part of Suicide Silence's Cleansing the Nation tour in 2008 in support of the highly acclaimed album The Cleansing. The tour would also include Emir, Beneath the Massacre, and Architects, which is honestly just a stacked lineup. They would also tour at Veil Maya, Fell Silent, and ABACABB for the Crush 'Em All tour in early 2009, which is another stacked lineup. But later in the year, they would join legendary bands Necrophages, Suffocation, Dying Fetus, and some of their contemporaries like Born of Osiris, Winds of Play, Darkest Hour, and many more for the Summer Slaughter tour, really getting their name out there and getting a bunch of new fans in the process. But the next year, the band would re-record Rareform with this new lineup, and the chemistry between them would really shine through. With a new lineup so shortly after the release of their second album, Rareform, the band decided to re-record Rareform with Anti's vocals instead. So on September 15, 2009, After the Burial would release the reissue of Rareform, and in a lot of aspects it was a step up. The band would change the cover, opting for a neon green and black design, which really fits as both guitarists were known for having guitars with these bright neon colors on it. They would also switch up the production style, especially with the tone of the bass and guitars. Many believe that the album has live drums on it, but it's actually Justin Lowe still programming the drums, but just with a subtler kick drum, which makes it a lot less obvious that the drums are programmed. Rareform is everything that makes After the Burial great, just a lot more refined and amped up. This time around, both Trent and Justin's skills on the guitar are on full display, with many of the songs on Rareform's main riff or hook being these dual guitar melodies that were unlike any other band in the scene at the time. Both Trent and Justin became like a dynamic duo, as they were always together and really mastered these synchronized melodies. The level of playing on this record is honestly some of the best I ever heard, being at Prodigy level. For a genre like deathcore, their guitar licks were just so catchy, as seen on songs like Drifts, Berserker, and Cursing Akhenaten. This record seamlessly blends all these different styles of metal like deathcore, metalcore, gent, and progressive metal in a very balanced and cohesive way, which is no easy feat. Drifts is a perfect example of this, as the song is filled with blast beats, odd time signatures, melodic interludes, as well as a very well done, flashy solo. They would end off the song with this breakdown at typical speed, and then decided to speed it up, which just blew me away when I first heard it. This would be the album where they would lean further into the gent sound, as they were playing with 8-string guitars, and really emphasized the tight, rhythmic breakdowns that was heavily associated with the gent movement. You could hear it all over Rareform, but they would seamlessly transition from these uplifting and melodic sections into breakdowns in a way that I've only heard a handful of bands pull off. Songs like Berserker, Cursing Akhenaten, and Aspiration quickly became fan favorites and a mainstay at their shows. Seeing these songs live with both guitarists when I was younger left me in awe, and it was just really impressive. It's similar to the sound they had on Forging a Future Self, but since they toured a lot more and were a lot more experienced, their unique style was refined and developed a lot further. The highlights on Rareform for me are honestly the whole album, if you can't already tell. This is one of my favorite albums in the genre. It really set them apart from other bands of the era, and shortly after Rareform came out, a lot of other bands playing a similar style would begin to emerge, like Volume, Structures, The Contortionist, and The Human Abstract, among others. Although these bands did have other things that set them apart, it's undeniable that Rareform was a defining work in the worlds of metalcore, gent, and progressive metal that really helped shape the sound of that era. So with After the Burial finally having a stable lineup, the band would start to tour a lot more often and drop consistently throughout the 2010s. But unfortunately, tragedy would strike a few years down the line. Following the reissue of Rareform in late 2009, After the Burial would continue their relentless tour schedule, touring with bands like All Shall Perish, Born of Osiris, and Suffocate for the Night of the Living Shred tour in 2009, and their tour schedule would continue into the next year. In 2010, their touring schedule was just as filled, as they toured with bands like Emmure, Terror, and Miss May I, as well as touring with other bands like Bleeding Through, For Today, and The Word Alive, even Fear Factory as well. Even while the band kept busy touring throughout the year, it was on these tours and on the ones from 2009 that After the Burial would begin to write and brainstorm ideas for their next album, In Dreams. Back in January of 2010, friend of the band Rico Roman would upload vlogs of the production for In Dreams. These vlogs gave fans an inside look of their creative process, as well as showing the fans Justin Lowe's personality, as he was always cracking jokes, smiling, and very laid back. Writing, recording, and mastering the album would take up most of the year, and on November 23rd, 2010, the band dropped their third studio album, titled In Dreams. This album would receive mixed reviews from fans, which is honestly pretty understandable, as when an artist is following up a landmark album, it could be hard to satisfy fans. Like personally, when the Guitarist followed up one of my favorite albums of all time with Intrinsic, I felt the same way and it didn't reach my expectations at first. However, the album would grow on me, as was the case with In Dreams. The album grew on a majority of fans, but this would be the first album where Anthony would write all the lyrics and arrange all the vocal parts, and he really gets to shine here. This is the album where they really embraced the gent sound and added a lot more of the groovy, rhythmic palm muted style that was associated with gent, leading into the gent sound. This would be seen on songs like Breadcrumbs and White Stones, Your Troubles Will Cease and Fortune Will Smile Upon You, and Sleeper. In Dreams would feature fan favorites like My Frailty, which is an absolute banger, Your Troubles Will Cease and Fortune Will Smile Upon You, and Pendulum. My Frailty really captures the sound of After the Burial, as the song is just filled with memorable moments to the main riff, melodic sections, the vocals, and it's really tight solo towards the end of the song. This album would also feature some clean singing, which is actually done by Trent. I think the cleans are solid, like not amazing, but definitely add to the album, as the hook for Promises Kept is one of my favorites on the album. In Dreams would see After the Burial add to their established sound and unique blend of styles. But even though this was the time that Gent started to get some hate from certain sectors of the metal community, After the Burial proves the viability of this sound. It really came through with a solid record, even if it's not to the level of Rareform in my opinion. Standout songs on In Dreams for me include My Frailty, Promises Kept, and Breadcrumbs and White Stones. Also, they released their first 2 music videos that year, which gave the band even more exposure. After the Burial would support In Dreams and ended the year off touring with Wings of Plague, Carnifex, and Upon a Burning Body for the December Dissemination Tour. The schedule of being in a successful metal band could be very hectic, as for a number of years, the band's touring schedule was constant, with only a handful of months in between each tour. 2011 would be a busy year also, as they would tour relentlessly in support of In Dreams, touring with As I Lay Dying and Winds of Plague early in the year, appearing on the All-Stars tour that summer with a myriad of bands like Emmure, I Wrestled a Bear Once, Born of Osiris, Attila, For Today, Sleeping with Sirens, and a bunch of other bands. 2011, man, what a time for metalcore and deathcore. But they would close off that year, touring with Veil of Maya, Misery Signals, and Within the Ruins. It was their experience touring that would help them continue to refine their live sound and performance, which is something that they're known widely for in the scene. Throughout their crazy touring schedule in 2011, the band would consistently write whenever they could and started gathering enough material to start working on their 4th album. In 2012, they would come out with another vlog with videographer and friend of the band, Rico Roman. This vlog would highlight the process of recording pre-production for this upcoming album. This video would preview a lot of the music that would end up being on Wills Within, and one song that ended up being on Dig Deep. However, even though they had enough material written and recorded, it would be over a year until the album would actually come out, but I'll get into that a little more later. So in the meantime, the band kept busy with their filled touring schedule. It was actually around this time that my brothers and I went from listening to death metal, thrash metal, and deathcore to a lot of the key bands on Sumerian Records. And it was my twin brother who actually put me on to After the Burial in the first place. This vlog would end up being my twin brothers and I most watched video around this time, as we were really excited for the album. And even though he was a bigger fan of After the Burial than I was, him listening to them all the time around me made me become a fan also. So in the year 2012, After the Burial would tour with bands like Whitechapel, Miss May I, The Plotting You, and Structures. After the Burial also hopped on Vans Warped Tour that year, which always gives bands a lot more exposure, as the tour was definitely a gateway for kids who were just getting into this style of music, and was actually a lot of my friends' first concert. but they also toured with the Contortionists and Reflections towards the end of the year. The band would also co-headline Euroblast 2012 with bands like Tesseract, Sky Harbor, Monuments, Chip Spanner, and Exvius. This festival showed just how popular the djent sound was getting, as the majority of the bands on this festival heavily embraced the djent sound. Now, in spite of having material written and recorded for their fourth album, it would take some time to get it mixed and for the album to drop. So 2013 would be another busy year for the band, as they toured several times with several different bands. This was actually the year I started going to shows a lot more, so I would see After the Burial twice in 2013. First, I saw them with Glass Cloud, the Contortionists, and Within the Ruins in April, which was just a stacked lineup and was an incredible experience. We actually met several members that night, including Justin Lowe, and my brother got his copy of Rareform signed. But that year, we saw them with Devil Driver and Trivium in September, and truthfully, I wasn't into the other bands like I was when I was younger, so I really just went to see After the Burial, but it was really worth it. But 2 months later, in November of 2013, they would drop their lead single for the album, titled A Wolf Amongst Ravens, along with a music video for the song, and they were actually playing the song live throughout that year. The next month, on December 17, 2013, they would drop their fourth studio album titled Wolves Within. For a lot of fans, this was a step up from In Dreams, and I definitely agree with this sentiment. The album is filled with the elements that make After the Burial great, the blend of djent, deathcore, and metalcore we all know them for. The technical playing, whether it was from the more groove-oriented riffs or the soaring dual guitar melodies, was a mainstay of After the Burial sound, and it was top-notch in this record, and they really honed in on this sound. Some people have complained about the guitar tone, and personally, I agree. I feel like the tone is a little airy, if that makes sense, and could have used a lot more beef on the low end. But there's a lot of standout moments on this album, with some stellar playing, like the opening of Neo Soul feeling like an homage to the opening of Fingers Like Daggers from their first record, and the way they layer the ambient clean guitar parts from the beginning with this crushing breakdown as an outro has always stood out to me. The ending solo of 9 Summers has always been one of my favorite moments as well, but the last minute of the song Disconnect is this dual guitar solo that absolutely just rips, and I'm glad they fleshed it out and weren't afraid to go all out with it, as it takes up the last minute of the track. Anthony's vocals are as good as ever, as he's always had great range, and the drumming is standard for the genre, which is saying something, as metal drumming is always top notch. Also, their first vocalist Nick does a little guest spot towards the end of Virga, which was a nice addition. Standout songs on this record include Disconnect, 9 Summers, Neo Soul, and A Wolf Amongst Ravens. After the Burial would continue this streak and tour throughout 2014, my brothers and I saw them that year also, as they toured with Chon and Animals as leaders, and we also saw them headline with Texas in July, I Declare War, and Reflections, which still to this day might have been one of the best shows I've been to, as that was around the time that my deathcore scene was really popping off. But the next year, the band would continue the relentless schedule of touring the globe, working on music and recording for their next record. However, Justin Lowe's mental health would begin to deteriorate and lead to a series of events that would sadly have tragic consequences. So with the success After the Burial's fourth album, Wolves Within, they will continue to capitalize on this by continuing to tour throughout 2014. However, this would start to slow down by the next year, as they were gearing up to follow up Wolves Within. They would tour with Vela Maya and Invent Anime in early 2015, and other than playing a few festivals, the band's energy was spent on writing and recording new material. On June 22nd, 2015, Justin Lowe uploaded his last video on his personal YouTube channel. The video was titled My Demo Reel and would showcase over 10 years of unreleased material and instrumental versions of songs that would later appear on future After the Burial albums. Songs like Laurentian Ghost and Lost in the Static would eventually appear on Dig Deep, but he would also have other songs on this reel from prior albums like Antimatter, A Fearful Men, and The Fractal Effect, among others. Lastly, this reel would feature a trance-styled electronic song and a song with just piano as well. This reel really showed off Lowe's creative skills in the realm of metal and outside of it. However, only 2 days later, Justin Lowe would leave After the Burial with a lengthy Facebook post that left friends, family, fans, and the wider metal community in absolute shock. On June 24, 2015, Justin Lowe would announce on his personal Facebook account that he was leaving After the Burial. This Facebook post at the time was described as, quote, a paranoid online meltdown by Metal Injection, and also Metal Sucks described this post as, quote, barely coherent, suspected to be the result of a paranoid episode. Lowe starts off this post with a statement that I could only describe as very ominous, as he says, quote, my decision to leave After the Burial, where do I begin? I've been set up, guys, by something more powerful than law enforcement and it's bad. Shit is about to hit the fan on an epic level, and the only thing I can do now is tell you as much of my side while I still can. Justin Lowe was very concerned for his personal well-being, saying in the post that he hopes the letter reaches as many people as possible, as he was removed as the administrator for After the Burial's Facebook page. Now, I'm not going to read this post in full, but I will leave it down in the description for those who are interested. However, I will say that Justin Lowe definitely does go off in what I would describe as a tirade, accusing friends, family, former girlfriends, and bandmates of all conspiring against him to ruin his life. He refers to several incidents that, in his mind, proves this conspiracy against him. Also, he doesn't list these events in chronological order, instead jumping back and forth from different time periods, some decades prior to the year the post was made. He starts by talking about the studio where After the Burial were recording and staying in to record their upcoming album Dig Deep. It may have been recording for pre-production, but we really don't know for sure what phase of recording they were in at this time. He starts by saying that the vibe was immediately off when he walked into Machine Shop Studios in Bellevue, New Jersey. He would claim that another band came to record, however, they would not make their presence known, almost as if they were hiding from him. He says he was the last one asleep, and when he got up, he noticed bags of luggage that were not there earlier in the day. When describing how the situation made him feel, Lowe would say in the post, quote, "At this point, I believe that something is very, very wrong. My body is telling me to get the F out now." I'm not going to describe all the situations he references to this degree. However, I feel that this particular one just goes to show how deeply his mental state affected him, as it was affecting his sleep to the point that he was checking for another band that most likely weren't even there. I feel for what he was going through mentally, as I can't even comprehend how scary it must have been for him, as a paranoid episode could be very terrifying, especially to that degree. But to summarize this very lengthy Facebook post, I will briefly explain all the situations and accusations that are made in the post. Justin Lowe first accuses his label of purposely making him go out to record this album, knowing that his data would be robbed. He believes that he would then be dealt physical harm as punishment for this, assuming this would be done by Sumerian Records and it would be filmed. Also, he claims that his close friend tragically taking his own life was actually staged, and that his friend is still alive, living in his cabin. Lowe would explain that there was no gravestone for his friend after he passed, and that he was getting different stories from different people as to whether or not he was cremated or buried. Lowe came to the conclusion that his friend was still alive, living in his cabin, and that Lowe himself would be framed for taking his friend's life. He claims that people were trying to set him up for this as a murder to, quote, "be put away forever for something I absolutely did not do." Lowe also claimed his keys were being secretly duplicated, as he had extra keys to his friend's house because they were very close, but then when he tried to use them, all of a sudden it failed to work, maybe as a way to prove that Lowe was responsible for his death. Also, he will go on to claim that the rest of his keys were being duplicated as well, and that his friends were in on it. He also claimed that Trent from After the Burial cut his finger on purpose to get blood on his shorts to frame him for this, quote, "fake S." Lowe felt that his girlfriend was also, quote, "very investigative on FaceTime the night his friend took his own life, so he drew the conclusion that everyone in his life was in on it." He claimed that she made sure he was close to his friend's house that night and would tell investigators this information. He also claimed in a separate situation that Trent wanted to set him up to look like a, quote, "predator," because back in 2012 he caught Trent fussing with a semen encrusted shirt that was under Lowe's bed. Lowe believed that Trent did this so that he could get a semen sample. Also, in this post, Justin Lowe admitted that he himself was sadly molested as a child. Lowe would also claim that the release of Wolves Within being delayed has something to do with this conspiracy against him, explaining that their lead single, A Wolf Amongst Ravens, was ready to be released in 2012, but no one would mix their album because of this conspiracy against him. Also, another situation he went on to talk about was when an old friend of his named Eric Lavold robbed their studio and was texting him right as the robbery was happening. Lowe claimed that Eric did this to make it look like that he was in on this robbery, further proving this setup in his eyes. Justin Lowe revealed that he was actually hospitalized in a mental facility at one point, which shows that this was most likely going on behind the scenes before being made public, and that Lowe's loved ones and his bandmates most likely tried to keep this information private. But he claimed his roommate in the mental facility was made to look exactly like his molester and even swung his feet on the bed just like Justin Lowe did. He also claimed that they messed with his medication and gave him laxatives. The combination of medication he was on allegedly messed with his train of thought, as he looked at a menu for 3 minutes not understanding much of it. Lowe would also claim that this was all done to discredit him in the eyes of the law when it comes to him being set up for his friend's murder. And he ends off his Facebook post by saying, quote, "I have a feeling that this goes back further and further, maybe even to my birth or childhood. Scored a perfect 10 on the Akbar and have had no problem figuring out how to read, play music, learn anything. Someone or something is afraid of me becoming too powerful. Some of my past girlfriends all have fathers who are very, very wealthy. I mean very wealthy. Coincidence? These are all dots I've connected, and I do realize how deep this is. I have a feeling there will be a lot more coming that I have yet to figure out. I realize what I have said could certainly spell the end for me, but it has to be said. In the words of Sean Keith, you have to speak your mind." So when describing these myriad of situations, he would use language like the plot thickens, or say that he's putting the pieces of this puzzle together, or this is starting to sound absolutely insane. In the moment of self-awareness, he even says this post is starting to sound like a conspiracy. It's clear that Justin Lowe was very distraught over this and felt that this Facebook post was absolutely necessary to make in order to protect his well-being. It is also clear that Lowe was deeply unwell and was most likely suffering from some form of mental illness. I don't have any qualifications to speculate on what Justin Lowe could have been suffering from, but what I can say from reading this whole post is that he was deeply plagued by some sort of mental illness that went over the edge and made him extremely paranoid. He truly believed that his loved ones were trying to ruin his life. Maybe Justin Lowe couldn't cope with his good friend taking his own life, and it sent him over the edge. We may never know what really sparked this, unfortunately. Now, I was actually Facebook friends with Justin Lowe and a lot of musicians in the death metal, metalcore, and deathcore scene, as I was a local musician, hoping to make it, so I was friends with a bunch of these musicians. So I initially saw the Facebook post on my feed, but I knew he was leaving the band, so I thought the long paragraph was just him wishing his bandmates the best and all that type of stuff. It wasn't until my brothers came up to me later that day asking me if I saw the post that I realized the true extent of the situation, and I truly felt for him. I was honestly very confused as I didn't know how mental illness worked. I didn't know that with certain mental illnesses, something triggers it. So people can go a good amount of their lives okay, and then all of a sudden be so unwell. Since I didn't know this, the whole situation was honestly pretty frightening for me. But I was not alone in this, as the situation with Justin Lowe made headlines in the metal world, with some fans speculating about what was happening. Fans, family, his bandmates, and article writers just wanted to see Justin Lowe be okay. There was an outpour of support, and we really felt for him during this dark time. After Justin Lowe's shocking and lengthy Facebook post, the metal community erupted as there were reports from many websites in the space, from outlets like Metal Injection, Metal Sucks, Heavy Blog is Heavy, and The Circle Pit, among others. All these articles thoroughly explained the situation while giving their sympathy to Justin Lowe, as it was clear that he was unwell. Everyone just wanted to see him pull through and find peace. It would be a full day before After the Burial would come out with a statement, and with good reason. On June 25, 2015, the following day, After the Burial came out with a statement addressing the situation with their former guitarist Justin Lowe. In the statement, After the Burial chose their words very wisely, keeping it pretty brief. They opened the statement by saying, "This is a very sad and hurtful situation for us to grasp, and unfortunately, it is one we still don't fully understand. Our dear friend, our brother on stage and off, has fallen into a very broken state of mind, a state that despite our continued efforts, we have been powerless to get him out of." Mental illness is a very complex thing to deal with, as it could be hard for people not going through this to even comprehend the situation, let alone help their loved ones properly get treatment for this. I mean, just look at Kanye West, who admitted to having bipolar disorder and often goes on and off his medication, causing a number of public meltdowns that were just tragic to see unfold. So with someone who has as much resources as Kanye West and Kim Kardashian are having issues dealing with mental illness, it just goes to show how difficult it could be to treat. The band will go on to apologize to fans for not addressing this sooner. However, they explained that Justin Lowe actually went missing shortly after making his Facebook post public. They explained that he was missing for an entire day and was only in minimal contact with a handful of people. They had reason to believe that Justin Lowe was, quote, unsafe in his current state of mind. So they spent the day he made that Facebook post frantically trying to reach him and on the phone with authorities trying to, quote, regain control of this situation. The band thought it wasn't a good idea to make a post about it while he was missing because they didn't want to, quote, escalate things further, which I commend, as it takes a great level of mindfulness to come up with this conclusion. But they explained that he was found and he was in the care of family members. After the Burial was also set boundaries for fans in the statement. expressing their need for privacy during this tough time, while also asking fans to not speculate about Justin Lowe's mental state. Lastly, they expressed how Justin Lowe kept these feelings hidden from them, and that the contents of the post was just as much news to them as they were to the metal world. There were no hard feelings, however, as the band understood what was going on and just wanted to see their friend get better. The band lastly pointed out that, quote, Justin is ill, and right now he needs more than ever to be shown that the world is not against him. He needs support and love from everyone, and to know that we only want what's best for him. We will continue to support him and his family as best as we can through this time. The post really showed how much the band cared about their friend Justin Lowe, and honestly just how complex and confusing mental illness can really be. This was a situation they didn't have any control over, and their heart broke for their friend, expressing how much they couldn't comprehend or fully grasp what was going on, but still wanting the best for their friend. Sadly, things would not get better, as 1 month later, Justin Lowe would tragically pass away. For about a month, there were little updates on the situation given to the public. It seems like they were handling the situation with Justin Lowe privately, which is good, as this is something that you really shouldn't make public. Fans, family, friends, the metal community, and myself included, all wanted to see Justin make a full recovery, but a little under a month later, shocking news would come out. On July 20th, 2015, Lambgoat revealed that Justin Lowe was officially declared missing, escaping the care of his family. About 2 days prior to the article coming out, Lowe's sister Shannon made a Facebook post addressing the situation and the details of it. So technically, he went missing on the 18th, but it became public knowledge 2 days later. Shannon said in the post, quote, my brother Justin went missing this morning. His car has been located and he has been declared a missing person. An extensive search was done today in the area that his car was found in and will continue tomorrow morning. She also goes on to explain that the area which his car was found was unsafe, so every park ranger in the area, as well as the sheriff, were searching that area for him. She also expressed her need for privacy in this devastating situation, but also showed gratitude for the many fans who reached out and messaged her. Shannon let everyone know that she would update them whenever she received new information. The day after her initial post, she updated everyone on Facebook, saying that the search was done for the day and that they searched the entire area surrounding his car. Shannon also said they walked the trails along the shore of St. Croix that day, but didn't find any sign of him. I like to add that this river borders the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin. The following day, they would spend their time searching the rivers, and she would also thank the Washington County's Sheriff's Office and the park rangers for their help. In a situation like this, you just feel powerless because there's not much you can do. It's really a needle in a haystack type of situation where you hope that your loved one can be located before any harm is done. I know this personally because a while back, a friend of mine actually went missing, and thankfully he was found. But being in that type of situation for a whole day really put into perspective what Justin Lowe's friends and family were going through around that time. It's a high stress and high anxiety type of situation that I really wouldn't wish on anybody. But tragically, in spite of their large search efforts and cooperation from the authorities, Justin Lowe would not be found alive. The following day, on July 21st, 2015, Justin Lowe's body was unfortunately found by a hiker beneath the Arcola High Bridge near Somerset, Wisconsin, and the day prior, as discussed before, his car was found in a parking lot near Minnesota. Authorities said his death was consistent with a fall. Until this day, we still don't know whether or not his death was intentional or an accident. His death is shrouded in mystery, as there still hasn't been much information put out on the circumstances surrounding it. Reports of his death would pour in from media outlets within the metal community like Revolver, Lambgoat, Metal Injection, and Metal Sucks. Even more mainstream outlets reported on this like Billboard and the Daily Mail. I want to say that it's clear that Justin Lowe was in a state of mental distress and fans were hoping that he would eventually make a recovery, but sadly it seems that his mental state stayed the same. He went missing and only 3 days later he was found dead. With these series of events happening so fast, it left the public and myself included with more questions than answers. From his Facebook post, it's clear that he did not like being admitted to a facility, and from after the burial statement, they revealed he was in the care of his family. Now, personally, I've never dealt with having any loved one with a mental illness. However, I think it's important to ask the question, if he believed that his friends and family were conspiring against him, wouldn't being in the care of family cause him more distress? There's no easy answer in a predicament like this. It's just something I thought of while writing this script. It could have possibly led to him escaping. Also, I want to note that it's been nearly 10 years since these series of events took place, and we still don't know much about what happened. This makes sense, however, as metal is a pretty niche style of music with a smaller community, but only time will tell if more information will be released. When speaking on her brother's death, Shannon Lowe wrote, "Justin was a gifted musician, music producer, and photographer. He was also a loving son, brother, uncle, and friend to many in the music community. The world lost an amazing talent. He touched many lives. He was receiving professional help, and we thought he was making progress. We are still devastated and heartbroken at his passing. We will miss him forever. Please respect our request for privacy as we try to cope with this tragedy. I will be logging off Facebook for a period of time to allow myself to grieve with my family. Thank you again to everyone's thoughts, prayers, and concerns. To those who have asked about a funeral service, my family has chosen a private graveside service and will not be holding any public funeral." This was truly an outcome no one saw coming or wanted. Shannon's words perfectly encapsulated the depth of this tragedy. The death of Justin Lowe left the metal community in shock. Heartfelt tributes from fans, friends, family, and fellow musicians in the scene poured in, as it's clear that Justin Lowe was highly respected and deeply loved by those who had the pleasure of knowing him on a personal level. These tributes also highlighted the impact that Justin Lowe and After the Burial had on aspiring musicians and those who made it to the level of being a full-time musician as well. Tributes and farewell posts were made from several bands in metal, including Periphery, Darkest Hour, The Underrated Conducting from the Grave, Decrepit Birth, The Word Alive, Woven War, Born of Osiris, Chelsea Grin, and For Today, among others. Musicians from bands like Veil of Maya, The Acacia Strain, Animals as Leaders, The Faceless, Whitechapel, Periphery, Born of Osiris, and God Forbid all made posts about the loss of their friend, many of which have toured with him in the past and got to know Justin Lowe on a personal level. The post from the vocalist of Born of Osiris really shows the type of person Justin Lowe was, with him writing, quote, "Love you, brother. Words can't describe how much I'm going to miss you. Justin was an amazing person, someone I could talk to for hours, go on adventures, listen to 90s rap and new metal all night, then make Bloody Marys in the morning. I looked up to him in so many ways, and how nice of a person he was. Rest in peace, my friend. Still can't believe it." Sites like the Daily Mail, Reddit, Facebook, and Instagram have deep archives of fans' reactions to the death of Justin Lowe, as the world would learn about his tragic fate. I even found my own Facebook post about Justin Lowe's untimely passing, where I simply wrote, quote, "This is a true tragedy. He was one of the most gifted guitarists in modern metal. I didn't even see it coming since his first statement. He was so down to earth. Rest in peace." I think it's very important to show the reactions of fans, friends, and family, just so you guys could see how deeply loved Justin Lowe truly was on a personal and professional level. User box_demos wrote a very touching tribute about him that I want to share. Truthfully, he put this into words better than I ever could. On Instagram, he said, "I just found out that one of my favorite guitarists, Justin Lowe, is dead. Justin, you were one of the reasons I picked up a guitar and wanted to start making music. You were a phenomenal player, and you forged a new genre of metal. You're a pioneer in my eyes. I loved you. It was always my dream to meet, and now that I'll never get the chance to do that, I'll do the next best thing and preserve in my music and never stop doing what I love best, just like you didn't. I know that the last few months of your life on this earth were hard. They were hell. You were confused. You were scared. I hope you can find peace now. I hope you can be relieved of all the stress and pain you felt in this world. I know you're feeling much better now that you can rest. Rest in peace, brother. I look forward to the time where I can jam with you on the other side." This was truly a heartfelt post that shows why Justin Lowe was so loved, the deep impact he had on people like me, and what he was sadly going through mentally. It's clear from posts like these that Justin Lowe's laid-back and humorous personality left a great impression on those around him, and it's a damn shame that he passed away in the circumstances in which he did. In spite of this, friends, family, fans, and musicians remember him for his unmatched skill on guitar and the type of person he was. After the Burial was scheduled to play the Summer Slaughter Tour of 2015 alongside bands like Born of Osiris, Veil of Maya, The Acacia Strain, Cattle Decapitation, and more, but the band would drop the tour altogether. Understandable considering the circumstances, as many of us know just how deep grieving the loss of a loved one can be. But the following year in 2016, After the Burial would release their fifth studio album, titled Dig Deep. The album was a success for the band, as it featured many fan favorites, including their most streamed song, Lost in the Static. Although Justin Lowe would not play on the album, this record would be the last After the Burial record where Justin Lowe would have writing credits on. When speaking on their decision to keep playing under the name After the Burial, vocalist Anthony Nordomazzo would tell Revolver, quote, "We talked about if this was a sign that we should hang up our guns or start a new band altogether, that maybe this was the end of After the Burial. We thought about it. It wasn't just a fleeting thought. We considered it. In the end, we just didn't want whatever defeated him to defeat us as well. And in this situation, if the roles were reversed, I wouldn't want the band to stop playing. I'd want them to keep playing and be as happy as they can. It's rough. Your whole world gets flipped upside down and nothing's safe anymore. You don't know anything. Everything's this big, huge question, which sucks. That's not a fun way to live, worrying about your future." In the years following Justin Lowe's death, the band would stay very active, dropping 2 more studio albums in 2016 and 2019 and an EP in 2023. After the Burial would stay being one of the best bands in metal, regularly headlining and making a living from their music, as well as an impact in the scene. In 2016, shortly after the release of Dig Deep, longtime bassist Lee Forrell would leave the band, staying on good terms with them. They would then recruit bassist Adrian Orpeza, who's been with the band for about 8 years now. So in spite of the tragic circumstances surrounding the death of Justin Lowe, After the Burial would stay an important band in metal. Justin Lowe was an incredibly creative musician who helped pioneer the sound of modern metal that would define much of the 2010s and beyond. His unique blend of gent, metalcore, and deathcore, as well as the virtuoso-like guitar melodies in his music, blended with the tight, syncopated riffs, was a style that influenced many bands to come. He was not only a creative guitar player, he was a producer and a photographer who loved to document the places he would travel while on tour. His hard work with After the Burial would pay off, as he would become a working musician, and that became his full-time job, which is no easy feat, especially in a more niche genre like metal. Justin Lowe's laid-back and humorous personality was infectious, as he was the type of person who made friends quite easily. He was loved by his friends, family, and fans, and nearly everyone he came into contact with. Sadly, mental illness would derail his career and tragically would be the cause of his death in 2015. His family and friends tried their best to contain the situation and get him the best help possible. However, mental illness is complex, so that's a long road even for those who have the resources to have the best doctors. His Facebook post leaving the band really showed just how mentally distraught Justin Lowe was, and it's sad he wasn't able to recover from this. I hope he's at peace now, wherever he is. However, Justin Lowe is remembered as one of the best guitarists of his era and is deeply missed by fans, his loved ones, and his bandmates. Rest in peace, Justin Lowe.